I'm so excited. We have a guest today. It's very exciting. I mean, first of all, it's very sad. Jen is very sick and she has lost her voice. She is fine, but we had no choice. But, let's be clear. I just said immediately, she was like, I don't have a voice. I can't record. And I was like, I know who I'm calling because I've been wanting to do this episode forever. And so I asked Lauren Billings, one half of Christina Lauren, to join me today to discuss Hot for Teacher.
Hot for Teacher! Oh my God. I think I was still in bed when I got your text and I was like, immediate yes. I don't care what amount of work is involved. Immediate yes.
Here is the thing. Apparently, there was not a ton of work involved for either of us.
No.
Because that was like an hour and a half ago.
That's exactly right. And I had to narrow it down. As soon as you texted, I was like, brrr, I had this long list. So
me too. So everyone on the podcast knows that, I love this trope so much. Oh, first of all, welcome everyone to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romances and I write them. And I'm here with Lauren.
Hello.
Introduce yourself, Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Billings. I am one half of the co-author duo, Christina Lauren.
And you also read a lot of romances.
I
one
do.
Of us.
I get a lot of my recs from this here pod as well.
Well, Lauren is about to fly to Germany to be with her German readers, and I told her we were going to fill her e-reader right up.
Yes. Keep me awake on that plane, Sarah.
I'm going to do it. I'm ready.
All right.
So listen, this is I love a taboo romance. In general, there are very few taboos that I won't wade into the pool for. But for some reason, this one really scratches an itch for me. And Jen is a teacher, so it does not scratch an itch for Jen at all. And so here's my thing. Before we started, I was like, why? What is it? Is it Anne of Green Gables? Does it go all the way back?
That is the origin story.
Because Anne's teacher is very stern with her, and she calls him out on it. She sort of says at one point, well, you're not as stern and you don't set as high expectations for the other kids in school. And he's like, that's because I believe that you can meet them. And I'm like, it might be just that, like, there's that whole, like, who is the Anne of Green Gables hero? People have a lot of feelings. For me, maybe it's the teacher.
Maybe it is. I mean, listen, there is no judgment here. That probably set off a lot of this particular taste in many a reader back in the day.
Probably. Do you have is there like a primordial teacher who you're like, oh, that's the teacher or the professor? Who, not in real life. I mean, we could talk about real life too, but.
No, I mean, I'm trying to think like what would be my origin? Like what is my entry point into this? And I can't think of a specific book. I think I just, I always had crushes on everybody growing up. And I think the idea of having a crush on a TA or a professor was just like so romantic to me, even though I'm sure it's like so inappropriate. I don't know. I love the trope so much.
Yeah. I mean, I also thought, like, is it Giles Buffy a little bit? Like, that sort of, like...
Okay, that fits.
That sort of... I feel like I'm not a fic person, as we all know, but, like, I feel like if there were a Giles Buffy fic, which I'm sure there is...
Oh, for sure.
Hit me up, first of all, everyone. That might bring me in.
I bet Adriana's got some good recs there. I mean, I always wrote Spuffy. I was a Spike Buffy writer, but I could see the dynamic of Giles and Buffy. I really did like some of those. And I will say, like, even when I was writing, like, alias fic, I like the sort of the handler agent, the sort of these power dynamics where one person knows more than someone else. And I think a lot of the books that we're going to talk about today flip that on its head a little bit. Like, I like it when it's done in a way that's unexpected, but still has that power imbalance.
Right.
I like it.
But you've never written Professor Student or...
We have not. I mean, in Beautiful Player, Will is sort of teaching Hannah how to date and how to be sexy.
Right. Well, I mean, sex lessons is like
a whole other
interesting thing. That you bring that up because it does feel like sex lessons is also extremely exciting for me, and maybe like the Venn diagram does.
Yes, I like it. And speaking of, like, recently Rachel and Solomon had Business or Pleasure, where she basically he's like a bad lay, and she's basically teaching him how to be good in bed, which I sort of love. And we did have in Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, Josh was her TA, but they weren't ever like hitting it back in that day. So
right.
No, I don't think we've ever written teacher student, although I'm not saying I wouldn't. If I could convince Christina.
No promises.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know about Christina, but I do know that Jen is an absolute no on that. And so that's why we're here.
Fair.
I've been saving it up.
She comes by it honestly.
It's true. Okay, so let's get into it. I started thinking about I feel like there are a couple of different ways that this is really commonly seen, right? So there's the first version, which I think is probably the most common, and you tell me if you like feel this way with your books. But I feel like there is like one night stand / rebound, which turns in, and then like the next morning or the next week, there's like oh God, what have I done?
Yes, I have a couple of those.
So I think that for me feels like the most common version of this, because it sort of elides the messiness of knowing this person is your professor or your student.
Right.
Right,
exactly.
Beforehand.
It's like the Pretty Little Liars version, because in Pretty Little Liars, that's like in the first episode, the Lucy Hale character basically like has this hot night with who ends up being her like high school teacher.
Yeah, so horrifying.
But great.
Well, I also think there's that too, right? There are these layers. The layers of taboo really shift depending upon what kind of school we're in.
For sure. And the age.
Oh, right. I mean, we should say everybody's over 18 in all these books for me. Like and I realize that it's kind of impossible to imagine, but like for me, it has to be sort of codified that literally she was not even in his mind, or he was not even in her mind,
right,
until the day she turned 18.
Right. There was just 100%.
Like a switch flipped and then it was fine. That's romance science.
Yes, we need that. That is a given.
So, all right. Well, I'm happy to start. Or if I want to start with those like kind of one night standy books.
Okay, I got a good one to start.
All right, you go.
Okay, so I just want to say at the outset, I was going to talk about The Love Hypothesis and Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood, because those books are my crack. And I love the dynamics in academia. The voice is so great. I'm a whore for voice. But I assume that at this point, anyone who's paying attention to the pod and anyone who's paying attention to romance in general will have heard of these. So I'm going to put those out up front because I think they really hit a lot of those buttons. But I want to highlight some that I think maybe some of your listeners might not have heard of. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about is Unteachable. It's by an author named Leah Rader, who I do want to say now identifies as he, him, and goes by the name Elliot Wake. But for anyone looking for the book, the author name remains Leah Rader, and that's Raeder. So this book is really kind of one of the diamonds from the new adult craze.
That is a great title.
It's a great book. So it's a diamond from the age of the new adult craze, which is in the early 2010s. And there were just a bajillion of these new adult romances. And actually all three of the books that I'm going to be talking about today kind of came from that era. And I think that era had a lot of fun with this trope. And so the premise is that there's an 18-year-old heroine. Her name is Maisie O'Malley, and she in many ways has had to raise herself. She's always felt much older than her years. Her mother is an addict. She really wants out of her small Illinois hometown. All she wants to do is get out of this town, go to film school. And her instruction to herself at the beginning of the book is like, just don't fuck up your future. Whatever you do, don't mess it up. So at the opening of the book, she's at a carnival. She's kind of wandering around. She meets this incredibly hot guy. The way they meet is he climbs onto the roller coaster next to her. There's like an empty seat in the car. And they, on the giant downhill, they like reach out and grab each other's hands. And so she's sort of this cynical narrator. She's like, I don't want to say that this is like falling in love, but, you know, there's something about a free fall. And that's sort of how this feels. So they hang out for the rest of the night, and spoiler alert, they end up banging. They bang in his car.
I mean, as expected.
And it is so good. The chemistry is totally off the charts. I swear the sex scenes in this book are really, really good. And so, of course, school starts the next day or next week, and he is the new film teacher in town. He is the 32-year-old Mr. Wilk. So they initially sort of try to stay away from each other, and then they don't. And it is just like glorious. So rereading this one I reread a bit of it this morning, and it just reminded me how good it is. I mean, anyone who knows my taste in reading knows that I'm a total sucker for voice. Mm-hmm. If you can be clever or snarky or use words in a way that I've never imagined, like I will let people get away with absolutely murdering a plot if they just have really great voice. And this book actually has great voice, but it also has a good story. It's not just like snarkily and funny written. The narrator, Maisie, is really cynical. She's almost hard to like at first, but you can really see initially from page 1 that it's such a self-preservation instinct. Mm-hmm. And what I love is that the moment that Evan, the teacher, comes into the picture, he really starts to crack down some of that self-preservation like shell. And he really is the vulnerable one. He's been through some shit too. And he kind of really opens her up. And I just love their dynamic so much. The writing is super sharp and beautiful. The chemistry is intense. I really, really, really love this one. So that is Unteachable by Leah Rader.
Well, what I'm really excited about by that, and I've never read that, but I'm going to now, literally downloading it right now, is you sort of hit the nail on the head with like what the scratch that I need itched, or the itch I need scratched for all of these books is that sense of like, they realize it's wrong and they try really hard to not do it, like to not let it go. And so all of the books I'm going to talk about have a vibe of that, like this sort of just nobody. I mean, there's just no fun in it if they're going to be like, all right, well, we'll just sign the forms and like move forward.
Well, and initially when Evan meets her, he's really obsessed with like, how old are you? How old are you? What's your name? How old are you? Like he wants to know. And initially she's just like, who cares? It's just like, let's just bang. And there's a reason why he's concerned with that. And I do think people who have a hard time with this book have a hard time with this reveal about him later. But I think that I am okay with books being messy and people living in gray spaces. And I just love the way this one was handled. I thought it was really raw and gritty and voicey and fun. So,
well, I'm in. I'm going to read it.
Do
literally
it.
This afternoon.
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned Allie, and you had mentioned the Love Hypothesis books ahead of time, and I said to you on text, I was saving it for the pod, but I thought it was a cheat. And here's why. Because I actually, and listen, I can already hear the like professors, the tenured professors, like every tenured professor who listens to this podcast is like, that's not a cheat. But I'm like, when you're like a postdoc or like deep in your PhD, like a grad student, it feels different because it feels like, well, you're basically colleagues. Like it's, even though I appreciate that that's probably not how it really is in my head, I'm like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
but I will say,
it's true.
I also have a series that I love very much. That kind of, so maybe this podcast will go like, the easiest to swallow to like the, oh God, we're really in boiling water here.
Yeah.
But I really love Emily Foster's Bellhaven series, which begins, it's two books. It's called How Not to Fall. And the main character is, she's a postdoc. No, I'm sorry. She's a grad student and he is a postdoc. Mm-hmm. And, she's like had a crush on him forever and basically is like, can we just do this? Like, can we just do this? Now, Emily Foster is also Emily Nagoski, who wrote Come As You Are, and she's a sex expert. Oh. And let me tell you who writes a hot sex scene.
This lady.
Somebody who like knows all the like biological everythings of the human body and orgasms. So it's terrific. At the end, there's this great reveal that he's actually like he's British aristocracy, and then the second book is all about like how they navigate that. I mean, like
takes
it's really,
a turn. I love it.
Really fun. So that's called How Not to Fall. It does end on a cliffhanger, but you can read both of them. But that's not my pick. I've thought about it as you were saying that. See, this is how I sneak them in.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have 3 rebounds turned. 2 of which I'm going to just like name check. One is because I actually recommended QB Tyler on last week's episode, but she wrote this book called First Semester. I think it's a duology. I don't know. It's either twin sisters or whatever. The first one, though, she has gone to college. She has a full-on rebound moment with a guy. She meets him she's like new in town. She's like her boyfriend was cheating on her. She's left her boyfriend. She's moved to, I think she's in DC, and she's on like a dating app, and she matches with somebody. And he kind of pushes her. He's like, where do you go to college? And she's like, I'm not going to tell you that because like, I'm like, that's personal information. Like we have to meet. Like she's very put together, this heroine. And then she realizes like after they've matched that like he is actually her criminal justice professor.
Oh, criminal justice too. That's got some grit.
I know. Well, so here's the crazy thing, and I wondered if I'd sort of like unlocked a secret kink that I'd never accessed before when I was doing this list, because they're all lawyers, all 3 of them. I know.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by my voice. No, I'm just kidding. By Ava Miles, author of The Paris Roommates, Thea.
This is just proof that we never lie to you here at Fated Mates. When we say Jen is sick, it's not just because I want to talk about Hot for Teacher. It's because Jen is actually, her voice is just gone. But let's talk about this.
Let's talk about romance, not my voice.
Yes. Okay, so this is the first in a series that are all called The Paris Roommates, character name. And this is Thea's book. And Thea's story is 10 years ago, she had this incredible life-changing experience in Paris at a restaurant in Paris where she was learning to become a chef. She lived with 5 other people in a Paris apartment and had like a magnificent year, like magical. She goes home to the United States and everything kind of falls apart. She is a pastry chef and she makes these gorgeous pastries, but she can't really find herself, and she feels like she's overworked and underpaid and doesn't know what she wants, except we know what she wants. And the book gives it to her because she gets a telephone call out of the blue that says 10 years later that this restaurant that they all worked at is in danger. And
she has to go and help.
Yeah, she has to go. She's summoned back to Paris to help save this restaurant. Luckily, all of her roommates are also back in Paris to save the restaurant.
Amazing.
And there's a hot lawyer, Jen. Oh, and let me tell you something. Something that I just realized on this very episode, is that I have a kink for hot lawyers. And I didn't know that. Anyway, stay tuned, everyone, because that's an interstitial that's coming. But there's a hot lawyer. And then, of course, just when she gets there and she realizes, wait a second, like, here I am in Paris living my best life. This is the choice I want to make. She gets the chance to return to the United States and run her own bakery in a small town, like a romance heroine. What will she choose, Jen?
Well, as someone whose child is currently abroad, I would say definitely she should go home to her mother. Just take this handsome lawyer with you. You can have it all.
Pinstripes work here too.
Thea, you can have it all. If you would like to find out what happens to Thea and the other Paris roommates, you should get on it with your monthly subscription to Kindle Unlimited. Thank you to Ava Miles for sponsoring this week's episode of Fated Mates.
I'm going to say that too, just so that it's clear for everyone.
Sure.
Thanks to Ava Miles for sponsoring this week's episode.
I'm trying, everybody.
The next one is Chanel Cleeton, who many people know for her wonderful historical fiction. But prior to writing historical fiction, she wrote contemporary romances. And she wrote a book called Playing with Trouble. And this guy is like he was like a 30 under 30 wunderkind, like lawyer. And then he like makes this big mistake in his firm and he gets sort of kicked out. Now he's teaching at this very sort of subpar law school. And the heroine has decided that she's going to go to law school like to like change her whole life around. She's the child of billionaires. He's very wealthy too. And he's, her torts professor. Now listen, this one starts great because they didn't rebound. She's sort of rebounding in life, but they don't have sex first. It begins with her in torts class, and she's like she refers to the professor as God, like, because he's so handsome.
Yes.
He's so
Make
stern.
us want him first.
Yeah, he's so stern.
See, that really adds a good layer of like taboo too, because if they already go into it knowing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it has this sort of like, oh, it's super forbidden.
Yeah.
Too.
And he makes her, he's like, oh, you would love this. He's basically, we're in her POV in the first chapter, and she's like, he calls on her. He's like, please, like analyze this case. And she has to stand up and, it's very Legally Blondie. She has to stand up and do her thing. And then he's like, don't sit down. I'm going to give you another one. And he makes her do a second one immediately after. And she's in her head like, fuck this guy. He's such an asshole. Like, he thinks he's hot shit. And then it switches immediately to his POV. And he's like doing it because he likes her so much.
Yeah.
Which again is very wrong. Don't.
But so great. Listen, if you've gotten this far in the episode and you're like judging,
he thinks to himself like, I want her so, like, I call on her too much. Like, I'm too into this woman. And then, of course, like, their lives intersect outside of school and they just can't keep their hands off each other.
We want a hero who is just, like, out of control when it comes to the heroine. So
oh, yeah.
I'm here for it all the time.
And then I'm actually going to do all three. But the third is J.J. McAvoy's Black Rainbow, where they had a one-night stand, like, because he was a musician in a bar. But then it turns out that he's actually this, like, hotshot law professor who all the students in this law school refer to him as El Diablo.
Oh, my God. That's amazing. Wait, so he just, like, moonlights as a rock star?
He moonlights as a rock star. Listen,
God,
romance, as Jen would say, is unmatched.
Listen, always unmatched.
And so he chooses, El Diablo chooses 12 disciples every semester or whatever year to work closely with him. And they're all like vying for him to be one of these 12. And she's like, and he picks her. And so there's this back and forth of like, was she good enough to be one of the 12? Or like, is El Diablo's disciple? Or is it because they like fucked him?
Because they bang.
Like, yeah. In his like, dressing room. Anyway, those are my, so I don't know. I have a thing about law professors, I guess. Maybe it's also because, law sort of codes the whole thing. You sort of nailed it with.
But also, that's true. It kind of plays with people who should know better, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting that 2 of my 3 are like theater professors or film professors. Like in Unteachable, he's the film professor. And in Losing It by Cora Carmack, he is her theater professor.
I love Losing It so much.
It's so delightful. And it's so funny. And if you're looking for something that's like taboo-ish, but like taboo light, I think this is a good one for you. Like if you want to dip your toe in this subgenre. So in this one, Bliss Edwards, she is a college student. She's in her 20s. She's sort of late in her college career. She's super sick of being the only virgin in her group of friends. And so she figures like the easiest way to get this over with is just to like have a one night stand.
Rip it off like a Band-Aid.
Rip it off. Yep. She goes out with her best friend, Kelsey. She's like looking at all these men. She's super picky. She sees this super hot guy reading Shakespeare over in the corner.
Oh, yeah.
And starts talking to him. And he's British. And
this all checks out. This is exactly how it goes.
It's amazing. He's British. He's adorable. He's like very flirty, has a little bit of like a dark side, like very seductive. Go back to they live near each other. She ends up inviting him in for reasons that aren't worth getting into now. And she's like, this is it. We're going to do it. And just before they start to get it on, she panics and makes up a fictional cat emergency and like bolts from her apartment, leaving him naked in her apartment.
Cora is so fun.
She's so fun. And it turns out like she shows up to school the next day. And what do you know? He's her new theater professor. So I think what I love so much about this one is it doesn't do what the reader expects. Like you and I were talking about how like a lot of times it's like you have this one night stand or this hookup and then like you think it's just going to be a one-off. It's like a rebound or it's just this like crazy night and you're never going to do it again. But in this case, like Bliss doesn't actually go through with it. They don't actually have sex, but she's humiliated. She's mortified by what she did. She feels like, oh my God, like the worst case scenario would be seeing this person again. And then of course she does, right?
Yeah.
But I think what I love too is that on their way to her inevitable virginity losing, they are very like, they explore stuff and they like talk about stuff and they both mess up and they fix it. And it's like very sexy and sweet and obviously funny. And I feel like this one is a foundational one. Like it's a great entry point for the student, the hot for teacher.
Well, that's really the balance too. You sort of nailed, you hit it there because for these really, so obviously there are also, and I have one on my list, there are like one-handed reads that, you know, fall into this like pile of kink.
Right.
But for these books to really hang together as like legitimate romance novels where we believe in earned and like long-standing happily ever after, right?
Yeah.
These characters can't be, there can be an age gap or whatever, but we have to believe they like know each other by the end. Like, it can't just be power.
Yeah, right. And that they're not too broken that it's just going to be messy and toxic for the rest of it. I mean, I do think that there is some amount of mess in Unteachable that, you know, some readers might have a hard time with. Both of these characters are really broken in a lot of ways, but I think I like the way that they try and like address each other's broken bits and are honest about the ways that they're broken. And, you know, I think it's really interesting. My other rec is like, actually, I think, I hope a lot of your listeners have read this one, and the ones that haven't, I really hope they pick it up. I know this is a not for Kate book, for a number of reasons.
Everybody knows Kate Claiborne is.
Yes.
Definitely. She's already turned off this episode.
Yeah. She will not even listen to this, even though like we love Kate. Okay. So the last one that I want to mention is On the Island by Tracy Garvis Graves. She's just a phenomenally talented writer and she's still writing just really amazing books. This is I think this is her debut. And
I don't know this one.
Okay, so
I'm so excited.
I'm really excited for you to read this because this one is one that I think a lot of people, they read the premise and they were like, hell no, this is not for me. But I just want to assure everybody it is for you. This book is for you. So 30-year-old Anna Emerson, she's an English teacher and the parents of one of her students, this guy named TJ, who's 16 at the start of the book. They hire her for the summer to tutor TJ because, and they have this house in the Maldives. They're like, please come and tutor our son.
Goodness.
He's in remission for cancer. He's missed a lot of school and we really need him to catch up. Can you come for the summer with us? And she's just like, she's in this relationship she's not sure she wants to stay in. She's like, this is a good chance for me to get away from my life and sort of think about what I want and then come back and make a decision. She's like, sure, I'll get paid to do what I do in the Maldives. And TJ's super annoyed to go because he's like, I'm finally in remission and now you're making me leave my friends
I want to have
again.
like a real life.
I want to stay at home. So he's annoyed. So the two of them are in this little plane. They're headed to meet their parents in the Maldives. And the pilot of the plane has a fatal heart attack and the plane crashes in the ocean.
What?
Yes. And so TJ and Anna have to like find their way to an island and they have to like figure out how to stay alive. And of course, initially they think like they're going to be rescued right away. Right.
Right.
But like, I mean, days turn into months.
They're coming.
Turn into years.
No.
And so I'm not going to say any more about it, but like these two people are
it's like
existing on this
Brooke
island
Shields
together.
Movie. Was it Brooke Shields?
Yes. The Blue Lagoon.
The Blue Lagoon.
Like at a time where he is turning from like a boy into a man and she is, you know, there through all of this. So honestly, I just want to know, I promise there's no underage weirdness happening. Like everything feels very age appropriate. And it's so like genuine and well crafted that by the time anything happens, you're going to be like shouting at your book for them to like finally smooch and more. So the other cool thing about this one is it's dual point of view. So you get to sort of see TJ both from like a young, grumpy, whatever, through like becoming a man and seeing Anna for like the woman that she is. And I just think this one is like so romantic and really perfectly done.
Listen, I love it when a romance really throws everybody up against the wall and a plane crash and a stranded for years on a deserted island is I'm for it.
Okay. I'm excited.
All right, my next topic, and I know you have many more books on your list, so
yes,
jump in. But now, I'm turning up the heat here because I want to talk about, oh no, I accidentally turned it in erotica.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Okay, I got one I can talk about.
I have two that are like, oh no, I accidentally did something very bad. And one of them, you guys, is so filthy. I'm like I'm kind of embarrassed.
Hold on, let me immediately take notes.
So, headphones in.
Pencil in hand.
Okay. So the first one I've talked about before. Everybody knows I love Charlotte Stein because I think she writes a book like I say it all the time. It feels like you are trapped in a phone booth with these like two people who are so hot for each other, and you cannot
if you haven't read Sheltered, I don't know what you're doing with your time.
There, Sheltered is. I mean, like there was a period of time where Charlotte was writing, and it was like literally every book just felt like more and more intense. These two people just super into each other. Well, this one is called The Professor.
Okay,
right there.
That's easy to remember.
Exactly. The Professor. And he's an English professor and she is her student. And she is supposed to turn in 5 pages on, Pride and Prejudice or whatever. And instead she turns in by accident a full erotica that she has written about him.
Oh, hell yes. This is amazing.
And he drops it on her desk and it's like, see me. And she's like, oh, shit. And then, of course, you're going to love this too. You listen, you just are. I know you will. Because
I'm so excited.
She goes to his office hours and he critiques it. And he's like, what do you want him to do to her? And you're like, oh my God.
I wrote it down.
And then, of course, right? But then what's so amazing about this book is it's not, like we were just talking about, it's not just these two just banging it out in his office, because he knows almost instantly, what he's doing is wrong. This is wrong. And he ends up leaving campus and moving to Belgium. He leaves the country, and she's so moved by him. She's so, the relationship that they had was so intense that she starts to send him letters, and she finds him, and then they send these super intense emotional letters back and forth where he's putting on a hair shirt and she's like, but I love you. And he kind of has to unpack a lot of trauma in his past. And talk about baggage and emotion here. There's a lot going on emotionally for these characters. But when they finally do end up together, it is this is great. This is exactly what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be messy. It's professor student. It has to be messy.
You want mess. We don't come here looking for clean and easy.
No, we go to other places for clean and easy.
We do. Not here. Okay, that one's first step. That's going to be first step.
And then I have a real dirty one.
Okay.
Real dirty.
Let's hear it.
Okay, I want to talk about Jade West, who now, if you've read anything by Jade West, automatically the dial is turned up to 11 on the filth factor. This one's called Teach Me Dirty. And she is an 18-year-old high school student, but she's it's a private school. So she's had this same art teacher for her entire career, basically, in this school. And she has had a crush on him forever. And he, of course, has never noticed her until she now is 18 and a senior, or in her final year at this school. And she is a magnificent artist. And he is a teacher who is you are a genius. Like I can tell you're a genius. And he's leaning over her sketchbook, like looking at, something she's been doing. And he accidentally knocks it off her desk. And the thing explodes with just like porny drawings of the two of
yes.
them.
Okay, so this is a little bit like dropping the erotica on, like turning it in as an assignment.
Exactly.
Like both of these professors are like, so you're a piglet, and I like it.
And he's like, we have to talk about this. And she's like, we absolutely do not have to talk about this. And then there's like a little bit of like she has a best friend who's a woman who's also 18, and they are like there's some like sexy stuff with her friend, like fantasy wise related to this professor. And it's very horny, and there's a lot of sex in this book. And
we don't hate it.
Listen, I'm not gonna not recommend it, is what I'm saying.
We don't get mad at these sexy books.
Exactly. So those are my two, like, turning up the heat books.
This week's episode of Fated Mates had a sponsor that fell through.
It's true. This whole episode.
And it's not my voice, by the way.
We're flying by the seat of our pants with this episode. You will hear more about that sponsor in a few weeks, but we figured that we'd take this moment just to talk about two things. One, did you know you could sponsor Fated Mates? Jen and I will do a delightful read about your book.
Or your business.
Or your business. We'll talk.
Or your best friend.
We'll talk about whatever you like. Or your best friend. Oh my gosh. What a birthday gift. Sponsor an episode of Fated Mates and we'll talk about your best friend. Anyway, we'll do a fun thing. We'll do some banter. It'll be great. And you'll reach a very large audience of people who really love romance novels and love and friendship and everything. And you and your best friend. So you can do that by reaching out to ads at fatedmates.net, or you can go to fatedmates.net and click on advertise, and all the information is there along with an email address, and you can learn more about what it's like to advertise on the show. But
we also have something cool to tell you. Yeah.
Listen, I have a cool thing to tell you, and I didn't talk about it on the episode with Lauren, and so I'm going to talk about it here, which is it is October, and that means that it is the time of year that I teach Start Your Romance Novel Today, which is a beginner romance novel writing class. So, and what I mean by beginner is literally you have a seed of an idea, maybe you've written a couple chapters, maybe you're almost at the end of your first draft, maybe you've never thought about writing a romance novel at all, but you're like, that sounds like it might be a fun thing to do. Next month is November. That is National Novel Writing Month.
Right.
And it's the perfect time for you to get started on November 1st and write 50,000 words by the end of November. Look, I've never done it, but Alexis Daria has, and look at her. She has a whole career. Anyway, this class is on October 29th. It's by video. It's about 2 hours long. You can join us. The recording will be available for the entire month of November, and you can find out more about that at sarahmclean.net and click on class when you get there right on the main page, or as always, check show notes.
Yeah. So everybody, we hope you'll think about advertising with us. We love to talk about your books, and we love to talk about everything romance related. So the sky is the limit.
And Jen sometimes does ads where she can be understood.
Okay. I mean, so this is making me think of a sexy book that I read a while ago. It's Aroused by Nina Lane. Mm-hmm. And it's the first in a series. This one I think is interesting because it's about Olivia and Dean Liv. She goes by Liv, and she's an undergrad. She meets him. He's a professor. He is not her professor. Mm-hmm. And so the interesting thing about this book, there's a lot. It's very sexy. It's very sensual, but it goes back and forth in time to when they first meet, when she's an undergrad, and 5 years later when they are married. Ooh. And they are sort of dealing with some stuff that has come up in their marriage that is sort of a result of the power imbalance of what they dealt with when they first met. So that she has just lost her job, and she has this feeling of sort of being constantly making choices based on his career and his life. And there's a decision that she makes or that something that happens early in the book and he doesn't necessarily agree with the way she's handled it. And so you sort of get to see them as a married couple going through like pretty normal, like married couple rough patch stuff, but also you get to see the hot intensity when they first met. And so I really think this one interplays with it well. And it's very high steam, but it also has like a lot of sort of this really yummy angst and like twistiness that comes in it too, that has a lot of payoff. Yeah.
I mean, I love all the ways these books like deal with the power, right? Because obviously when you come at a book that has such taboo in it, I mean, you wrote Beautiful Bastard, right? Like there's, you know, the struggle of like, okay, well, there is a natural power dynamic here that has to be rebalanced. And of course, like in romance, all romance is about power. But it is fascinating to me how like each one of these books comes at power in a really different way and has to rebalance it. You know, often it feels like, especially when we're dealing with like young characters, like, you know, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, like the power ends up balancing with, you know, the teachers leaving or the professors, like, you know, changing jobs so that it feels okay.
Yeah. And actually, you know what, that makes me think of a book that I read forever ago that is one I recommend to so many people who want to like this dynamic but don't want it in like kind of real time, which is Ain't She Sweet by Susan Elizabeth.
That's on my list too. Yeah.
It's perfect because this is like, great. It's so good. I mean, so the character Sugar, she's like, she was sort of the mean girl, right? This is like a mean girl coming home redemption story. She was genuinely terrible. Yeah. And she's coming home
she
and
got him fired.
Yes. And so she comes home and the hero is the high school teacher that she got fired. And now he's like a successful novelist. He's living in her childhood home and he like drags, he makes her go through it. And I think like,
they punish her. I mean, she is the sort of primordial unlikable heroine for me, like in the sense that she feels unredeemable.
Yes.
In the way.
And she kind of knows it. I think that's what I love about it. As she comes in, she knows that. And there's like, you know, the redemption story there is, I think, very well earned. And so for anyone who likes the dynamic of teacher-student but doesn't actually want to read it when they are teacher-student, I think this is like this is a great choice. And they're older. So it's like 15 years, I think 14, 15 years after she graduated.
Yeah,
so.
And he comes home, he's returned and he's like, he has written a book about the town.
Yes.
And so he's like a hero in town.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That too had to have been one of my early, like, that's a Susan Elizabeth Phillips book. And it is, Sugar Beth might be my favorite of her heroines. And so that must also be part of why it's hardwired in. Also, like, all the other stuff, Guardian Ward, like all those old school historical things that just felt, you know, teacher-student.
Yes. Give me all of it.
Ugh, I know. Guardian Ward's very difficult to pull off these days.
It is. It is. But listen, I want to encourage people to keep trying. Keep at it, guys.
I wrote one, and literally the joke was that in the first chapter, like 17 people died before he inherited the dukedom, the house, and the girl, right?
He was the last.
Okay, so my last one is this one's out there, you guys. This is a 400 level, I think. This is it's a little like Fatal Attraction, but make it romance. So
okay.
It's called The Unrequited. It's by Saffron Kent.
Ooh.
And it is set on a college campus, and the heroine who has been through it and has an on-page, check your content warnings for this. I mean, obviously check your content warnings for all of these, but check your content warnings for this one. She has like a substance abuse problem. She has a traumatic past, and she is on campus and she sees this like wildly handsome man like walking through the quad, and she follows him and is like, who is this man? She like follows him into a class and sits down at the back of the class. And it turns out that he's a poetry professor on campus. He is not her professor, but he's a professor. And she like basically comes back every day for this poetry class. And they are drawn to each other, but she like basically, like, this is pretty close to stalking. And it's really interesting because this obviously predates like dark romance as a category, but I think that it could lean into this, except it feels so much. Saffron Kent has thread this needle so perfectly that it actually, you understand like why she is drawn to this man and like drawn to him like personally, drawn to his like mind, but also just like drawn to the idea of somebody who's just like stable and calm. Now the twist here, and it's not a twist in the book, I'm not spoiling anything, but the twist here is that he is also married. And he has this relationship where he and his wife have a child, and the child was born like during a very fraught time of their marriage, and they've decided that they're going to like stay together because they have this child, but his wife hates him. Like they do not have a loving relationship in any way. But there is also this kind of layer of like, how is this all going to work out? Because the power's so weird. The heroine has like a lot of mess in her life. And then on top of it, he's married and has a baby. Like,
oh my gosh, that's
it's
a lot.
So intense. And again, feels very much like Saffron has this voice of like, where you feel just like you're so close to everybody's thoughts in her books. And it's very intense. And I actually really love this book. I read it in one sitting, and I've read it multiple times since I read it the first time. But it is not for all markets. Like,
what's the title again?
The Unrequited.
The Unrequited. I mean, I think, sometimes we just want a super messy book. We want a really intense read. Sometimes we're just looking for that book that's going to gut us for an afternoon and then put us back together, or not. But
Saffron Kent, I've talked about on the podcast before, she does this. She sort of specializes in these taboo romances, like often a pretty significant age gap. And there's an age gap here because of, the dynamic, but it's not intense. And she does, like best friend's dad. Like she does a lot of these, but instead of them being kind of like, here's a novella, like Jessica Cain style, right? Like here's a novella about my best friend's dad. These are like 400 pages of like really intense feelings around this. And so
this is my shit. I'm so excited.
If you love The Unrequited, Saffron, I've just opened a Saffron Kent world for you. And I love her books.
The portal is open. Yeah. Excellent. Okay.
I also think, knowing how much you love voice, like she is an undeniable voice. You could show me a page of any one of her books and I'd be able to tell you it was her.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So that's my last one. Do you have any more that you just must talk about?
I think I covered my must discuss.
All right.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Well, I have 15 others, but I think these are the ones that I want people to run out and get.
These are them.
Yeah.
Tell everybody. So you're going to Germany right now. You are in Germany currently. This episode will run while you are in Germany.
Yes.
So if you are in Germany listening, maybe
come
you
say
can
hi.
Go,
yes.
Say hi.
We're going to be in Munich, Erfurt, and Berlin.
So fun.
I know.
And then what do you have coming up?
We have a lot of travel, but we're drafting our next book, which is our 2025 book right now, which feels like made up time, but
a million years from now.
It does. But next year we have an Amazon short story that is so freaking adorable. I cannot wait for people to read it. We have our Disney Tangled book, which comes out in June. And then we have another romance coming out in May that we have not yet announced or talked about. And so there'll be more information about that soon.
Mm-hmm. And then, so people can see you. Tell us where we can see you for the next couple months. You're in Germany. You're going,
and then we're in France. We're doing the Festival of New Romance. We'll be at the book festival in Guadalajara in November, and then we're not going to be traveling until probably April or May. So we have a little bit of downtime at home, which will be really nice.
Yay!
Yeah.
Well, everyone, if you haven't read Christina Lauren before, what are you doing?
What are you doing, people?
We've recommended about all of their books at one point or another.
We're delightful.
I can confirm. Also, their most recent book, The True Love Experiment, is an absolute love letter to romance novels. So,
yay. Oh, and I should say the paperback for that is coming out in early February. I should know the date, and I don't. But it has both of the exclusive epilogues that were in our special editions for Target and Barnes & Noble, and it'll have a sneak peek of our upcoming book. So,
yay!
Yay!
So fun.
Yeah.
So that is that. Where people can find you at Christina Lauren.
Yep.
Everywhere. And Lauren, thank you so much for pinch hitting, for jumping in.
I'm happy to anytime, especially this one.
It is a real treat. So if anything occurs to you in the meantime about like who that primordial teacher was for you,
yes,
the one that implanted the button, I want to know all about it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, in my life, there was no real life hot teacher. I never had a single hot teacher.
Maybe for the best.
Yeah, probably.
We'll just live it fictionally.
Considering this as a career, yes, probably for the best, or else I would have been a weirdo. So, anyway, everyone, this is Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with Lauren Billings, one half of Christina Lauren, filling in for Jen Prokop, who has lost her voice but is on the mend. You can find us at fatedmates.net. You can find us online at Fated Mates, at Fated Mates on Twitter, at Fated Mates Pod on Instagram, or if you just really love hanging out with us, you can join our Patreon, which you can find out more about at patreon.com/fatedmates. Thanks so much, everybody. We hope you're making good choices out there and reading whatever you like. No judgment.
None.